Welcome back to Professional Perspectives. I'm Marvagella, joined as always by my co host, Praneeth Vimuri. Today, we have an episode that is very special. We're sitting down with a coach whose journey spans decades of leadership, development, international growth, and historic achievements in basketball. Someone who has shaped players, programs, and cultures across multiple continents. We're honored to welcome Coach Scott Flemming, the head coach of the Indian national basketball team.
This is his second time leading the national program after previously serving from 2012 to 2015. Between these tenures, Coach Fleming served as the technical director of the NBA Academy India and as the senior director of basketball operations for NBA India. His coaching path also includes being the head coach at Northwest Nazarene University, top assistant with the Texas Legends under Coach Del Harris, and more than 22 years as a college head coach in the United States.
Across his college coaching career, he recorded over 440 wins and earned National Coach of the Year honors twice. Under his leadership, India earned a gold medal at the Lusophonia Games and secured one of the biggest victories in program history by defeating China in the FIBA Asia Cup on their home court. Coach Fleming is known for his passion for teaching the game, developing character, evaluating talent, and investing in people at every level.
Coach Fleming, thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to learn from your journey, your philosophy, and your experience building basketball around the world.
Thanks, thanks so much. I look forward to sharing with you, and not only I have a passion for basketball, but I've been in India now 12 years, so I have a passion for India as well. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, just to kick off the conversation, what would you say originally inspired you to pursue coaching as a full time career?
well, I had played in college. I played both baseball and basketball in the U.S. And when I left college, I took a job at my alma mater as an assistant coach at Mount Vernon Nazarene University. And from day one, I loved it. It was something that the coach had asked me kind of out of the blue, and it was a part-time job. I was already working there, and from day one, I loved it. So I was there 2 years, and then I moved on to Wheaton College to get my master's degree because I still wasn't sure coaching was what I wanted to do full time. But it just happened that the coach there had just gotten the job. He was looking for an assistant coach, and so that whole timing happened. If to me, it was really almost a spiritual thing that God was kind of lining this all up for me. And so I was there 2 years at Wheaton College as an assistant, and during that time, I really felt like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do full time. So I went on from there to the University of South Alabama. I was an assistant there, and then got my first head job at Nyack College in New York. And so 5 years as an assistant. And now it's a total of about 43 years of coaching, and no regrets. But I love the platform that coaching gives me. Not only, I'm as competitive as they come, and I love to win games. But that's not why I coach. Um, it's a great platform to make a difference in people's lives. One of my greatest joys is that I hardly get through a day without hearing from one of my former players, whether it's an email, a text, a WhatsApp, social media, whatever. That's really the great part about it. And I've coached over 500 players now, and so um, as fun as it is to compete and have wins and losses and all that, that challenge, those relationships are at the top of my list as far as why I do what I do.
Yeah, and I feel like we can totally tell your passion for coaching, and it's very obvious through your answer. And I feel like it really is amazing to see what you've been able to develop as a coach and the relationships you've built, like you said. So during your early years as an assistant, what foundational lessons shaped your approach to leadership and like your style of coaching?
I had a coach my senior year in college that demonstrated something different than I had had before. I thought pretty much, the coaches I had either thought you had to hate them to play for them. It was all discipline and no relationship. Or I had a few coaches that were probably a little too buddy buddy. It was almost like a peer, and there wasn't a lot of discipline. But my senior year in college, I had a coach that befriended his players, but still demanded a high level of discipline. And that's what I want to do. That spoke to me. That made it worthwhile. And so I let him know about every year that I'm trying to do my best to model after his example. Because some coaches will say, you can't be their friend and all of that. And that's okay for them, I guess. But that wasn't enough for me. I wanted to really befriend my players, not a peer, not an equal, but really have relationship with them, but also demand discipline. And so that's what I learned, not only from him playing, but that's what I learned by good examples and bad examples as an assistant coach. Sometimes you learn a lot. I've learned from all the coaches I coached under, but you at times say, I'm not going to do that when I get to be the head coach too. But that's probably the biggest lesson is just my philosophy of how I go at it. And you have to show the players that you care. And once you do that, you can even be hard on them as long as you're positive most of the time and you celebrate their victories and you tell them when they're doing a great job. That allows you then gives you credibility to really get on them without them taking it so personal. And I was observing as an assistant coach, watching all those dynamics of the head coach. And as an assistant coach is a lot easier because you're not making all the lineup decisions, and because they're basically two things you're going to run into problems if you're losing and if you're not getting playing time. That's where you have some issues. But you have to navigate your way around that and show respect to all the players, even if they're not playing. That's important. So those are some of the biggest lessons I learned before I was a head coach.
Yeah, that's so great how you had a mentor who could kind of guide you through and figure out what you wanted to do when you became a head coach. And when you did become a head coach or just an assistant coach, you've coached at college level, NBA development league, and internationally. What has each stage taught you about adapting your leadership?
Yeah, well, they were very different. I loved all of them, for different reasons. But I also know people are people, and sometimes you have to, like here in India, adapt to the culture and some of those things. But it wasn't too much different in regards to just how you treat your players and how you motivate them. And so I feel like I was able to take that at all different levels, even at the NBA level. We had 6 first-round draft picks on our team with the Texas Legends, and these guys were really good players. And for one reason or another, they were down in the G League at that time. But I really found even there, if I cared for them, if they felt like they weren't just a part of my resume, and I was genuine with them, that they would do about anything for me. And so that was kind of a test, even at that high level, that they're still people. They still want to be respected. They still want to know that you genuinely care for them. And so I was able to do that at all three different levels.
Yeah, and just want to say, like, coaching is a dream job for so many people who want to stay involved in the basketball sphere if maybe they can become a player. And I was wondering, in your career trajectory, I know we did mention it at the start, but could you really quick give us how you moved from college basketball, coaching college basketball, to now coaching the Indian national team? Can you kind of
Yeah.
like give us a breakdown of the roles you went through?
So, I have a lot of young coaches even now say, hey, I want to be a pro coach, or I want to be a head college coach, or I want to be an international coach. And to most of them, I tell them, you either have to know somebody pretty well somewhere along the line to get a job. Um, and it's pretty tough to get your foot in the door, and but you have to be pretty successful to stay in a job. And you also have to be willing to give up a lot financially sometimes, unless you really are fortunate and you know somebody. A lot of these high school coaches that are making decent money are not willing to step backwards to go forwards. And I was willing to do that at that time. I had some goals in my mind, and fortunately, my wife worked, and she was able to pay the few bills that we had. But I was willing to kind of step back and not make much money, or sometimes no money, to move forward. And so That's what I tell them. So when I was an assistant at Mount Vernon Nazarene University where I played, and in the summer I was called by the head coach that he was looking for an assistant, and I had really not thought about coaching. I loved playing. I played a couple of different sports, but until he asked me, and like I said before, I then agreed to do it, and I loved the first day of it. So I was there 2 years, and then I still wasn't sure. And as I told you before, I went on to Wheaton College, and I spent a couple years there. But while I was at Wheaton College, there was a player named Donnie Nelson. It was his last 2 years in college. And his father was the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks at the time. And Donnie, just he and I became close and had a good player coach relationship, as I shared with you before. And so I left there and went 1 year to South Alabama, a Division I program where basically I worked about 12 hours a day for no pay. And I had written all kinds of schools to see if they might have some positions. And South Alabama was the only one that wrote back and said, "Yeah, come as a volunteer." And I had actually gone down and interviewed there too. So we picked up and went down to South Alabama for no salary at all, because I felt like that would be something that I had to go backwards to go forwards, kind of. And it was being a part of a Division I program, and so I was there a year. And because of that, I was offered the head job and athletic director's job at Nyack College. And so, I thought that was a dream. It was a small school. It was just north of New York City, and I was there for 3 years and kind of got that going. And while I was there, I had some great opportunities. I ran basketball camps down in New York City, down in Brooklyn. I ran some in Harlem and Hell's Kitchen down there, and that was a great experience for me to be able to do that. But when I was at Nyack, then I got a call from my former school where I played at Mount Vernon, and they wanted me to come, and it ended up being as the athletic director and the head basketball coach. And so I was there then almost 20 years. And we built a program, where we were contending every year for a national championship. We're number one in the country at times, for 1 year, and then, just consistently. But all those things that I shared with you before were happening as well, beyond just, winning basketball games. And it was there. Now I go back to Donnie Nelson. I was there and I was ready to make a move, and kind of, I was getting we were getting the itch to move on and do something else. And so out of the blue, Donnie Nelson, who is now at that time was the president and GM of the Dallas Mavericks, and he said, "Coach," he still called me Coach. He said, I purchased. It was a D League team at that time, but G League." And he said, I want you to come out and help me start it." And so that's where that move came, and I left a pretty secure situation, at the school I was at, to go to Dallas. And so I was there for 2 years. Loved that experience as far as the coaching part of it, and then the second year I was there, because he told me, he says, "I'm going to hire you as an assistant coach." Even though I'm going to hire a head coach that's going to fill the seats. You're going to make a big splash. And so I was the first one he hired as an assistant coach, which is kind of rare, but that's what happened. He called me a few months later and said, "Hey, I'm going to hire Nancy Lieberman as the head coach," which was the first woman to ever coach an NBA affiliated team. And so I was with her the first year, and then the second year, she moved on, and they hired Del Harris, who was now a Hall of Famer coach, and it was a unique experience because Dell had pretty much retired, and they brought him back. And he told him, he said, "The only way I'm going to do this is if Scott's my assistant coach, and I coach the home games, and he coaches the away games." Which, you wouldn't do that in the NBA, but in the G League, you can get away with some of those type of things. Um, so that was a really good year. I thoroughly enjoyed coaching with him, and then even had a chance to be a head coach on the road. Yeah. So that at that time, then I was there a couple of years, and the NBA got a hold of Del Harris and said, "Hey, India's looking for a national coach." And be honest with you, I didn't even know there was basketball in India at that time. And so, long story short, I had a friend of mine years ago make a statement. He said, "You should do what you do best and go where it's needed most." And that kind of came back to me when this opportunity in India came, because there are a lot of guys, and I enjoyed my time in the US coaching, but there are a lot of guys that can do that, and not everybody willing to go to India to coach. And so, because of that, we were offered the position and went sight unseen in 2012, and took the job as the national coach there. So that's kind of my journey. And then, of course, off and on between 12 years here, I've been worked as the director of basketball operations for the NBA, and the technical director, which is basically the head coach of the NBA Academy. And now this is my second stint um, as the national coach. So there's kind of I, synopsis of my journey.
Yeah, that's so amazing to see your whole journey from being able to especially take up that position in India where you knew you could bring your talents over there and help all the players over there who might have needed it more. What would you say your biggest adjustment was from moving from college coaching and United States, the G League team, to leading a national team overseas? Like, was there different cultures that the players experienced that weren't similar to American players and all that?
Yeah, somewhat. Again, as I said before, it's not totally different. I mean, basketball is basketball, but it's a different culture. First of all, is a different culture beyond basketball that we had to get used to. And the one thing you can't do is compare it to home. If you do, and there were coaches before me from the U.S. and other countries that didn't last because they just came to coach and they really didn't make that adjustment to embrace the culture. And so, as much as I wanted to do that, it took me a month or two to really say, okay, I've made the choice to come here. I'm going to embrace this culture, and I'm living where they are. And so, that happened, and that gave me a piece to just be here for the long run. And so, that was an adjustment somewhat too. With the players, it was interesting because people asked me right off the bat what it was like, what kind of players do I have? I said, there's some good players here. There's some guys that are Division 1 level or pro players, but at the beginning, I've kind of felt like I was coaching a middle school team. As far as their knowledge of the game. But I'll tell you what, they were a lot more hungry and than a lot of the U.S. players that I'd coached before, and they were had a lot more respect, and I felt like they would run through walls for me. So we really improved in that first year. Probably our weakness was defense. We weren't very good at it, and so we spent a lot of time at it. And a little over a year later, when we won the Lusophobia Games gold medal, and then when we played China, I've told people that we still didn't shoot it that well, and we probably turned it over too much, but we could really defend as a team. And so when we played them, it was a low scoring game, and maybe if we had played them 10 times, they might have beat us nine. But on that night, our defense and our courage and our stick to itness really helped us to win that game. And so yeah, there were some adjustments. It's a little different philosophy, and I don't know about even style, but I've had to adjust to that, and we've kind of met halfway in a lot of ways. I'm willing to let them do what they're used to, and even some of their terms that they use and all of that, but they needed to come my way too. I mean, that's why they bring in an international coach, is to try to improve on what they're doing. And it hasn't been easy always. We're every game we play, we're usually the lower ranked team, and so it's just a matter of challenges of upsets every time. And sometimes we've done it, and other times we haven't. And so it's just always the challenge. And right now we're still a ways from being where we'd like to be, but we have moved up in the rankings and in the ratings of the FIBA, and we've won a couple of games over recently over higher ranked teams. But the win in China was a big one. I didn't realize how big it was until it happened. And that they hadn't beaten China in 75 years, and to do it on their court, I think they were shocked, and I think I was a little shocked, but so proud of our guys. And here I've told people this. This is probably the highest and the most proud moment I've had in India was after that game that we beat China. Watching my players walk around those lobbies of those hotels where all the other players and coaches were, and for the first time, at least in a long time, just having a lot of respect and all kinds of people coming up to them and telling them how great we played, and hearing that, yeah, boy, when you play India, you got to come ready to play. And so they were able to walk around those lobbies, that lobby with their head hanging high and very proud, and for the first time in a while, just really getting respect as one of the top teams in Asia. And I will never forget that. That was really the high point. So.
Yeah, totally. That is so great to hear. Uh, First, like when you took that leap of faith to go coach at Southern Alabama and to do it as an unpaid job, kind of like a volunteer, that definitely shows your passion for coaching. And now leading India to beat China in the Lusafina games, that's a huge accomplishment. And I would say it really showcases your love for the game, but also what you've done for the program. So that's so cool. Uh, my next question for you is the main question I've been wanting to ask you is you've seen Indian basketball for so long, you've seen where it was, you know where it's going to go. So my question is, where is Indian basketball going to go in the next 5, 10, 15 years? And how much is it going to improve?
Well, here's the positive thing. Right now, there is a pro league that's going to be happening probably within a year. They've tried a few times; it hasn't worked out. But the federation and a company named ACG has partnered together, and they are actually right here in Bangalore, where I'm at. They have a training facility going on right now for a lot of these players that will be drafted for this league. And when that happens, they'll also be bringing in some international imports and all of that. So that, we've seen kind of slow, steady growth at times when I've been here. I think this will really jumpstart more an increased growth and faster, because now the young boys and girls in the country will be able to watch these players on TV. They'll be able to have heroes instead of just having NBA heroes, in another country. They'll have their own here, and that's somewhat on the national team, but having a pro league will really enhance that. As you guys know, cricket is a religion here, and it's if you turn on the TV, it's 9 out of 10 sports stations have cricket going, and I appreciate that. But these other sports are now slowly coming up, and I think this pro league is going to be a big part of that. And so it'll probably kick off sometime next year. They're not sure quite right now, but they've committed themselves to it. They're bringing these players in to train, and and then they'll be drafting these players along with other import players. And so within a year, I think you're going to see a legitimate pro league here in India. And I think that's going to be a big plus. Besides that, we just need to keep doing the things we need to do to improve the program. I always talk about with our players narrowing the gap, because there's some things we can't control. We can't control a lot of these teams we play have naturalized players, or many of them. We'll play some teams that'll have their top three players are Americans, and FIBA rules somehow allow that to happen. But in India, there's no dual citizenship, so we'll never have a naturalized player. I have Indian origin players that contact me all the time that want to come and play for India, and they want to play for my country. Either their parents grew up there, or they're probably, in your case, many of the same things that they want to play, and it's still at this point they're not allowed to. Because I asked them, first question I asked, well, do you have an Indian passport? And they say no. I said, are you willing to get an Indian passport? And in most cases, and I understand, no, I'm a Canadian citizen, or I'm a U.S. citizen, and so that's kind of the end of the conversation, at least at this point. Hopefully that'll change maybe someday, but that would be a big plus, if even if we could bring two players over from, and the other players in these other countries are not even affiliated with their countries, but if we could even bring over some Indian origin players, that would be a big plus because there's some really good players, as you may know, in the U.S. and Canada and other places, Indian origin players that would love to play for our national team.
Yeah, that's so amazing, and I'm so excited to see what's coming up in Indian basketball in the next couple of years. And kind of transitioning the conversation over to your coaching philosophy, what you see in players, what qualities do you look for beyond just physical talent when evaluating a new player?
Yeah. Well, you start with talent and then you kind of go from there because that's not the end of the road, as you probably know. There are a lot of talented players that don't make it, and I tell players all the time that it's not about talent; it's about productivity on the court. And I have some players that are less talented than others, and that was even true when I was a college coach. There were better players because they were more productive. So I asked three things of my players, and these have been from the beginning as a head coach, and they really haven't changed. It's not a fad or a good saying. I asked three things, and these are all things that players can control. One is to play hard. Everybody can play hard. I don't care what your talent, height, weight, talent. You can play hard all the time. And so that's one of the things I certainly look for in players that they're just willing to give their best, give 100%, when they're in practice, when they're in games, not to practice lazy and show up in games and say, okay, now it's time. We've got to see consistency there. The second thing I ask is to play together. This is a team sport. If you want to play tennis or be a bowler or whatever, feel free. But if you join a team like this, whether it's American football or soccer or basketball, you have to be willing to give up, some of your rights to really play together. And I'm talking here more on the court where you share the basketball, you're unselfish, you're a good teammate, all of that. And then the third one that kind of goes along with that is put team above self. Again, because it's a team game, like I was mentioning, you have to give up some of your individual rights to be on a team. It can't be about you. And some of the greatest players I've ever coached were very talented, but they put their team ahead of their own accomplishments. And you know what? You can do that and still average 25 points a game or whatever is needed from you. But as long as that attitude is, I'm here for my teammates. And we talk a lot about being a great teammate. So, even when I was looking at high school games or if I was looking at junior college games or whatever, when I was a college coach, I would watch them when they weren't on the court. I would watch them, especially in practice, beyond just playing. What were they like on the bench? Were they involved in the huddles? Were they sitting on the end and kind of pouting because they came out of the game, or were they in there really cheering their other teammates on? And so those are the intangibles that are really important. Again, you have to start with talent, but then you have to look at all these other things to really see if you've got a player that can help you win games. And when we choose the team here, as well as when I was a college coach, it's not always the 12 best players. It's the 12 players that give you the best chance to win. And sometimes um, that that is a little different. And again, we get back to the productivity thing over talent. So those are some of the things that I would look at.
Yeah, I feel like that was a really good answer to explain the core values that you would want like every player on the Indian team to embody. And going back to your answer to the question before this, about the dual citizenship, I do kind of agree, and I feel like uh, it's definitely detrimental to the Indian basketball program because other countries, of course, can take advantage of the dual citizenship, and can, of course, take players from other teams. And we kind of saw this play out like in the Olympic Games, where some teams were taking advantage of it, like America being one of them. Um, but yeah, hopefully that does change. And another question I had for you is, of course, moving to India to coach Indian basketball is a huge change. So my question was, what did you learn during your first tenure with India that you brought into your second tenure? Because I know you had two different stints, right?
Yes. Well, of course, I had overcome just the culture shock and all those things. I'd been in India so long, so that wasn't as big of an issue. I have moved several times. We've lived now. This is our fifth place to live in India. We started in Delhi, and then we went to Mumbai, and then to Greater Noida, Chennai, and now Bangalore. So we've had to kind of make those adjustments as well. But yeah, I pretty much knew what I was getting into. The positive thing that I why I took it the second time was I felt like there was a new president and they were much more interested in partnering with the NBA than maybe before, and they were interested in having a pro league where they you have to bring in other investors and other people, and so that was something that I was pretty encouraged about. In fact, before I ever came this second time, I brought the president. He wanted to. I mean, he asked me if he could come to the U.S. along with his family and another administrator in the federation and just come and see what basketball was like in India, or I mean in the U.S. Sorry, in the U.S. So we ended up going to New York to the NBA office and spent some time there. We went to the finals in Dallas. They ended up sitting at the half court line and right next to the commissioner of the NBA. We went to San Antonio and spent some time with the Spurs down there. We went up to Sacramento, where, as you know, there's an Indian owner there, and so I had gotten to know years earlier, and so we spent some time there. And then we ended up at Pepperdine University as a college program and watched some workouts there. So he got a good feel for he had never been to the U.S. before, and so this kind of gave him a feel for what it was like. And so those are some of the things that happened right off the bat. And I the NBA Academy was closing down because at one point we thought we were going to move and have an All Asia Academy, and it got to the point where uh, the NBA Academy was great, and I think it really helped. I mean, half of the players on my team right now are graduates of the NBA Academy. But it it got to the point where maybe it wasn't a great return on investment for the kind of money that the NBA was putting into it, because maybe we'd only have two or three or four players, excuse me, that were able to go on and play pro ball or go to play in college or whatever. And so those players would have still been able to have that experience in an all Asia academy. But anyway, it ended up closing, and so I had some decisions to make. What am I going to do now? I've been in India all this time, 10 years, and so I had a few other opportunities, but the federation came to me and said, "Hey, would you be willing to come back and coach us again?" Of course, then I got a lot of players, calling me and saying, "Coach, you need to come back and do this." So I felt like at least to make this transition for the team, for the new president, all that, I would come back and help them make that. And knowing this, later the pro league was coming, I could help them transition to that. So that was the motivation. I really hadn't thought a lot about coming back and doing it again, but I feel like this was a time that maybe they needed me for this transition.
Yeah, that sounds amazing to see how you really planned out your coaching and investment almost on the league to see that it's going to be spiking up in the next 5 years. So now is a great time to be implementing your talents. So now, kind of talking to our audience of young athletes, of our high school students, how do you teach your young athletes to stay mentally resilient during adversity where either, oh, they don't get chosen for their team right away or something like this?
Well, I have some life experiences that can help that. Um, I was cut from the team when I was a ninth grader in high school. And I tell people it was myself, Michael Jordan, and Earl Monroe. We all got cut in the ninth grade. I think those two guys went on to have a little better career than I did as a player, anyway. Um, but anyway, I have that experience of what that's like, and I had a choice at that time to say, okay, that's it. I'm going to go on and do something else, or I'm going to really work hard at this thing and get back at it because I don't know if I put in the kind of time that I needed to then. And so I worked so hard that one year that I was sitting out and came back and made the team as a 10th grader, ended up being on the varsity and starting and getting a college scholarship from there. And so I know what that's like, and it's hard. And but you got to keep your eyes on the goal, and if it's important enough to you, you're gonna spend a lot of time in. And when you look at the Kobe's and the LeBrons and Jordans and all these people don't always realize how much time they spent in the gym when nobody was watching, and the cheers weren't happening, and they weren't making any money, and all of that. But they spent hours and hours perfecting their game when nobody was watching. And then because of that and because of their talent, years later, they're making millions of dollars and they've got thousands and thousands of people cheering them, and they're all going to be in the Hall of Fame. But I think whatever level you play at, you can't just come to practice and play during the season. You have to, if it's important enough to you, like anything in life, you've got to spend a lot of time working on it and perfecting, your game, and spending a lot of time where you're not getting anybody cheering you on and no one's helping you but yourself. This is when you go from external motivation to internal motivation. And there are a lot of rewards externally after you've learned to have that internal motivation.
Yeah, it's absolutely great to hear that you went from not making the team in ninth grade to getting a college scholarship after playing varsity senior year. So that's really great to hear. And I wanted to talk to you a bit more about fostering like basketball in India and the basketball culture. Like for me personally, I lived in India from 2014 to 2020,
Okay.
and in that time frame, I was taking basketball classes, of course, and I wasn't that big. I was like 8 years old. But I remember our coach was like this guy who was like maybe in high school back then. He was like he made it in the NBA academy, and it was like this huge revelation. And I feel like that was great for instilling basketball values in kids in India. And how do you see that growing over the next few years? You kind of did touch on that. And also, how do you see like with the formation of the new league? How do you see that also helping basketball grow in India?
Yeah. Well, one thing that I've and I think it's getting a little better, but when I first got there was India, young boys and girls were starting so late. Um, in the U.S. where I was from, they're sometimes they're starting at 7, 8 years old, training and being on these club teams and all of that. Where in India, uh, I mean, the earliest was like 13 or 14 sometimes, where they got more serious about it. If I used to give the example, Amrit Singh, who is my starting center for the national team, didn't start playing until he was 19 years old. He's a 7 footer. He was playing kabaddi. You probably know what that is, right? A lot of people don't. But at 19, they looked at him and said, "Man, you're 7 foot tall. You ought to try basketball." And so 4 years later, he was the starting center for the national team and was very good. Ended up playing pro ball in Japan and down in Australia. But I would tell people, some of these coaches that I would do clinics for, I said, if he had started when he was 8 or 9 years old, we'd probably see him in the league, in the NBA. But because he started so late, so that's one of the things that we're trying to get kids to play, you know, earlier. Now, in regards to pro league, I think there's now, as you probably know better than I do, many parents in India feel like you can't be an athlete and a student at the same time. And so a lot of these good athletes quit sports at the 10th standard because they're pretty much made to do that. So whenever I talk to parents and I share with them, in the US, some of my best players were also the best students because they were driven at whatever they wanted to do. And I'll many times say, okay, if you can't do both, think about a 24-hour day. And so I'll go through, you have so many hours for studying and sleeping and eating and going to school and all of that. So I'll say you're left with about 3 or 4 hours. What do you do with that time? And so a lot of the kids will say, well, I play with I'm on my phone, or I play video games, or I just hang out with my friends. I said, there's your basketball time, or whatever sport or whatever you want to do beyond that. And so I don't think I've convinced the country, but I try one by one to at least to look at that. But here's what a lot of the parents feel like. Why would they play basketball if there's no pathway, if there's no career for them? You know. Well, that's kind of true, but I also come back with, playing a team sport like basketball, and this is what I felt like in the US, helped you to be a better lawyer, business person, teacher, engineer, whatever you decide to do, because of all the lessons you learn by playing a team sport. And so that's my first one. But the second one, now, at least there's a pathway with this pro league coming along, that they might say, okay, I'm going to let and this is going to be for men and women. I'm going to let my child play basketball because there actually is a pathway to play professionally, just like what happened with cricket here. So those are kind of my two talking points when I talk to parents. And so those are, I think those are going to be important. And I think just for them to see a pathway of a pro league may help the parents to allow the children to go beyond just the 10th grade in playing sports.
Yeah, and I think that's so relatable, that experience, to many of our audience, many of our high school kids, where their parents don't believe that sports provide that much value and that it's almost in a way a waste of time. But yeah, there's so many benefits in playing on a team, being able to collaborate with peers and like compete like that. I think it's such a positive experience for the young mind.
Yeah,
What Yeah.
I have learned, and I know maybe people this isn't popular to everybody, but probably learned as much or more from my coaches growing up than I did my teachers. And I had some great teachers, and I learned a lot from them. But man, some life lessons and some relationships I have with my coaches. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I don't think it has to be in sports. I see, a lot of my players right now that I had in college are doctors and lawyers and very successful business people, and they will point back to their time playing sports that really molded them to do that. I had a player that was 5'5", maybe 6 at the most, and I was recruiting another player in high school, and he happened to be on the court at the same time. And I really liked him, but I said, man, he's just too short. This player that I told. And then I saw him a second time. And again, I was looking at somebody else, and I said, boy, I love this player, but I just think he's probably too small to play college basketball. I had a third time that I went back uh, and looking at another player, but kind of curious about him. And by that third time, I said, I've got to have that player. And so I recruited him, signed him, and he ended up starting for me for 3.5 years. He was one of the best point guards I've ever had at the college level. He was a big time overachiever. And now he is a doctor. He was the valedictorian of the college that I was at, starting point guard, went on to med school, and now is a doctor. And so those are kind of the stories that I love to tell, that you don't have to give up one for the other. And I share that, and I have many others that I could share, but that's probably the best one that I have.
Yeah, and when you were talking specifically about coaching and like forming a better relationship with your coaches and maybe your teachers, I thought about the movie Coach Carter, and I was wondering if there's any movie recommendations you might have for our audience relating to basketball.
Well, of course, I go back long enough. It started with Hoosiers. I love that movie, and them being the little school that overcoming all the obstacles and following their veteran coach. Coach Carter is another one. There's some other like We Are Marshall. That's one of my where they were. The tragedy of that plane going down and taking the lives of all those players, and this coach starting all over again. Those are kind of my, instead of maybe the romance movies that people get emotional about and cry about. Those are mine because not only as a coach, but just I get excited to see those kind of movies. Another one is Glory Road. I don't know if you've seen that one, but that was about UTEP. It ended up being, they're calling UTEP now, but they're in Texas, and that was a social justice type of thing where that was the first time there were really many African American players playing at a high level, and they ended up winning the whole national championship, which I thought was great. So those are a few movies. There are a lot of those that are very inspirational that I've watched over and over.
Yeah, I mean, these are all great recommendations. I watched a couple of those actually. I know the African American Story. That was one of my favorite
Yeah.
movies when I watched that. Yeah. So kind of I have a question about this player that specifically stuck out to you. Sure, he did have the talents on the basketball court, but he was a little short. Was there any like other qualities that made him stand out that made you want to have him on your team?
Yeah, absolutely. When I saw him play, I mean, first of all, I said play hard. He played as hard as any player I've seen or have coached. Um, he also just had a determination. He was a very smart player, and that has a lot to do with it. You know, some of the players that you see today, I was just watching a game this morning where Luca was playing, and Luca is not very quick. He's not athletic as some. Maybe he's more athletic than you think, but and I had a chance to be in Dallas when Dirk Nowitzki was there too. And the same kind of thing is when you're a smart player and you really understand the game and you develop your skills, you've got a chance to be great. And so, yeah, those are some of the qualities you see how their court awareness, their effort, and their just desire to play every possession. I talk a lot to my players about some players kind of off and on with possession. You have to try to win every possession, and then the game will take care of itself. And so those are some of the qualities I saw in him. I mean, he tried to win every possession, whether he's on defense or offense. There was no resting, and he was always thinking of that next play. And so that's when you know you have a great player, when they can fulfill all of those qualities.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk also about from the coaching standpoint, going back to your historic win over China. What did this mean to you, and how did the gold medal at the Lusofina Games impact the team's confidence and also future expectations?
Yeah, well, the Lusophoniya games were the first time we really won anything of real significance because there were some very good teams in there. These were teams that had a Portuguese affiliation or background, and so we had several really good African teams that were there. And I'm not sure India had ever really competed with those type of teams. In the championship game, we played Angola, who had been a perennial basketball power, and we ended up beating them in the championship game. So that took us into the Asia Cup with a lot of confidence. That was the first time I think we felt like, hey, we're pretty good. We've got a chance to compete. And a lot of people talk about that China game, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But as a coach, I was more proud that we were competitive with everybody. We won some, we lost some, and the big win was the China win, and that's what people like to talk about, and for good reason. But I was so proud that I just felt like every game we played, we had a chance to win, and that I think that had been a long time, if ever, that would have been the case with an Indian team. The Asia Cup was really interesting. I don't know if you know this background, but we played Japan in the first game, and kind of long story short, they when we got to this tournament, they said that our players with turbans couldn't wear them in the game, and they'd been doing this for 75 years and all of that. So I got with the technical director of this tournament, just argued up and down. This is something meaningful to them. It's their religion. It's just cloth. It's not going to hurt anybody. This is for their families. They do this, and so we went back and forth and back and forth. They finally said, "Okay, we'll let them do it." And when we got to that game, that first game against Japan, 5 minutes before the game, the the referee and the technical director came over to me and said, "No, they can't wear their turbans. I'm sorry, it's not allowed by FIBA rules. There says you can't have anything on your head." So I hadn't said anything to these players at the time because I didn't want to, have them worrying about all this. And so here I am 5 minutes before the game. I walk over to them. I say, "Listen, these were my best two players. They're telling me that you can't wear your turbans. I fully would understand if you don't play. I know how meaningful this is to you." And immediately they said, "Coach, for you and our country, we'll take them off." And so they went back to the locker room to do this. I wasn't happy. I felt like it was really wrong for them to be asked to do this, but they were willing to. But they didn't, they came out once with it kind of partially taken down. They said, "No, go back, take it all off," and all that kind of thing. And so it wasn't until almost halftime that they came in the game. And by that time, we were down 15 points. I think we ended up losing by about 20 that night. Well, that could have gone either way. It could have just torn our team apart or bring us together. And unfortunately, it really brought us together. So that was the next night we played China after that game. And I had been getting calls and messages from all over the world. Even in the U.S., it became a social media thing where let the Sikhs play and all of this. And so We played China the next night, and we were highly motivated as a team because of what had happened. Now we had to execute, we had to play well, but that was the night that we beat China in China, and it was so it had some even greater satisfaction because of all of that. Now since then they've done away with that rule, but at the time it was pretty tough to have that happen. But these two guys unselfishly put the team above their self and played. And so I have great admiration for them. I would have had great admiration for them if they hadn't have done it. It was really their choice. But that was a pretty special time um, in that Asia Cup in 2014.
Yeah, I think that's also a great example of, overcoming this adversity as a team together. Even though, yes, you guys did go down in Japan that in the Japan game, you still came back even stronger and ended up winning in China, which just sounds amazing. Sounds like an amazing experience.
Yeah.
Sounds like that's what coaching is all about. Yeah, in moments like that. So, in your view as a coach, what would you say separates a good player from a great one?
Well, I talked about it earlier, just time spent out of practice, and I think also the whole mental part of it. That people sometimes overdo the physical, and you have to start there. No doubt about it. You can't. You have to have talent. You have to have some athleticism, but the mental part of the game is probably what separates the good from the great. And also making corrections. Many times I'll have players come in and they're not great shooters. They kind of their form isn't great. And I'm not one that says there's just one way to shoot. But I'll ask them. I said, okay, you're a pretty good shooter now, and this is my word. Do you want to be good or do you want to be great? And they say, I want to be great. If you want to be great, we need to fix your shot. We need to make some adjustments with it. And so, if you're willing to make adjustments and you don't feel like you've arrived as a player, and there's room for improvement, we all have. I still have room for improvement as a coach. And whenever I think I've arrived, I need to probably get out of it because you have to be a learner. And so, I would say the biggest separation is the time you spend out of practice working on things, and then the part of it where the confidence to play too. I tell coaches all the time, the best thing you can do for your players is to give them confidence, because there needs to be some external motivation there. Now they have to then take that and make it internal for them, but a coach can go a long way on helping that to happen. And that's when I get back to, rather than criticizing them all the time and telling them all the things they've done wrong, you ought to be celebrating when they do it right, and cheering them on, and that gives you the right then to get on them when they've done it wrong, and they don't take it personal. So
Yeah, I feel like success between like a coach and a player is like a two-way street, right? It takes a lot of effort from the player, but also recognition and kind of adaptability, also from the coach.
exactly.
And I have a two-part question for you. The first part is, after decades of coaching, what still excites you about the game? And the second part, do you foresee any Indian players making it to the NBA?
All right, for the first part is, I'll say this: my favorite time of coaching is practice. It's not the game. Game is kind of the final exam after all the work you put in. I love practice. I love working with players, training them, seeing them get better. And so that I still have a passion. I mean, I look forward to every practice I have, because I can get out and do what I love to do. And then, the other thing is just seeing young men grow as people, as a man. And in my later years now, coaching, I've become, at least intentionally, much more of a mentor, not only for players but for a lot of young coaches. And I spend a good amount of time talking and even helping young coaches get positions. I had a lot of people help me along the line when I was younger, so I feel like I need to pay back and help young coaches to reach their dreams. And so, those are some of the passions I have to this point. And The games are fun, but I think the process is where my passion is. Um, what was the second question again?
Do you foresee any Indian players making it to the
Yeah.
NBA?
Well, there've been a few kind of dabble with it. We had one of our players, Amjot Singh, played a couple years in the G League and had some success. Satnam Singh was drafted by the Mavericks in the second round, and he was just a little slow of foot, and just some different reasons why he didn't make it. But you may or may not know he's a big time wrestler now, and that would have never happened without his one in a billion and all of that. The documentary and being drafted in the NBA. I think he got some notoriety, and now he's a pretty well known wrestler. Wrestles all over the world. He lives in Atlanta now. I talk with him occasionally, and he's doing really well. Um, but I know it's gonna be difficult. When I tell people that only 1% or less of players you in the U.S. make it to the NBA. And these are some of the greatest high school and college players. I mean, when I was in the G League, we had college players there that were all Americans, that were some of the best players in the U.S. And for one reason or another, whether they were a tweener or their work ethic wasn't enough, or they just didn't have the mental toughness, they didn't make it in the NBA. Now, I don't think it's impossible by any means. I think this pro league is going to help. I think we have some of our players right now are really young. Most of them are really young. They were in high school just a few years ago playing at the NBA Academy. And like I said before, about half of my players or more were in the NBA Academy, and so they're in their early 20s, and they're not going to peak. I think the best teams in India are going to be 3 or 4 years from now when they get to be their mid to late 20s, and they'll have a pro league for a couple of years under their belt. So let's see what happens with that. I can't make any predictions right now because it's tough. It is really tough to make the NBA, regardless of where you're from. But hey, it's possible. And with a country of 1.3 billion people, there's bound to be somebody that rises to that occasion.
Yeah, we're definitely getting there within the next few years. Yeah. So, one thing that I was actually wondering is me and R have both played sports, and something I think really relatable is when there's really long training periods and there's not immediate results, or you feel like nothing's really getting better. How do you keep players motivated during these times? How do you keep them to keep on trying, keep on pursuing the same passion that they had when they started?
Yeah, sometimes less is more. There's some countries that feel like you have to train 8 hours a day. The more you train, the better you get. But research would tell you that that's counterproductive, and that you can't go all day long, and you can't go all year long. You need some breaks. You need some time to recoup physically, mentally, and so I think that's important. The second thing I would say is set some short-term goals. You know, every player I talk to wants to be in the NBA or wants to play Division I basketball or whatever else. Have these long-term goals or play on the national team here in India. But that's not always possible, and that's a longer-term goal. Set some short-term goals. I wanna make the team. I want to make my state team. That's my goal. I wanna start for my state team. I want to average this many points. So I think it's important to keep people motivated to have little chunks of short-term goals that are more reachable, that they can feel like, hey, I made that goal. Now I move on to the next one, rather than just NBA or bust, and give up on their dream. I hope that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I feel like that is really good advice to be ambitious, but not too ambitious, so that kind of doesn't derail your
Yeah, and one
motivations and
one step
motivation.
one step at a time. I would
Hmm.
never take that dream away from a player of their long term, but because it's so hard to do and so long off is it's sometimes players get discouraged, and so that's where it's important to set those shorter term goals.
Yeah, totally. And for as we start to wrap up for our final question, what is the single most important piece of advice you would give to young listeners dreaming of making an impact in sports, not just basketball?
Well, I would say whatever you do, obviously you want to give 100%, and don't always think about what's out there after this. You know, whether it's a coach, whether it's a player, an athlete, a student, do the best at where you're at right now. That's the way to achieve more later. Don't always be thinking about what's coming next. Um, you know, a lot of high school players, oh, I just if I can get to college, I just want to go to college and play. Well, the way to get to college and play is be a really good high school player right now, and not so much think of that. I mean, you know, it's a fine goal, but sometimes I think young athletes skip over the present and only look at the future. And that's where they right now, excuse me, they need to be the best high school player they can be, or middle school player, or whatever it may be. And that's true in all of life. You know, you just need to take care of where you're at and be the best that you can be where you're at. And the future will take care of itself if you're doing that. I think that's probably some of the best advice I could give, because I even have, when coaches come to me and say, "Oh, I want to be an NBA coach, or I want to be a national team coach or college coach," I say, "Well, you know what you need to do? You need to be the best high school coach. You need to be a great high school coach, and maybe those things will happen." So,
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Pretty much sums up like the entire mentality you need when going into these competitive industries. So yeah, thank you so much for all your insights. Everything's just been so amazing for both me and Arav. We learned so much, and I'm sure our listeners, high school, college listeners, all these people are going to learn so much from your insights.
well, I appreciate what you're doing, and you're well prepared, and it's been a privilege to be with both of you, and I wish you the very best. Are you Golden State fans?
Oh,
NBA
I'm
fans?
a Golden State fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a huge
Arav,
Warriors
yeah.
fan.
Okay.
Mhm.
Are you both in the Bay Area, or where? Yes or no?
So I'm in, yeah, Pleasanton, so Greater Bay Area.
Okay.
And I'm currently based in Phoenix right now.
Oh, that's where I have a
Yeah.
home. That's my
Oh,
U.S.
really?
home is in Phoenix. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Really?
So I was brought up in Ohio, so I'm kind of a
Mhm.
Cavaliers fan.
Yeah.
I also appreciate, being in Dallas, that they kind of have my heart as well.
Yeah.
But I actually have a former player that's on the staff at Golden State, Anthony Vereen. And so
Uh-huh.
Oh, wow.
yeah, he's a we keep in touch. He's done well. He's kind of an overachiever too.
Yeah.
Um, he played at Texas Christian, I think it is Texas Arlington, one of those schools, but
Uh-huh.
was barely drafted into the G League. But he's worked his way up, and now he's an assistant coach with the Warriors. So
Oh,
um,
Amazing.
yeah, so there's the hard work that's put in, and
yeah.
determination, even from somebody like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and just a second, what Praneeth said, totally. Thank you so much for your wisdom and answers and time and taking out like a chunk of your morning. But I definitely feel like the advice you gave in this episode is gonna relate to a lot of people across like the whole world for our audience, and not just in high school, but also college and people trying to get into sports. So yeah, thank you so much for that.
great guys. Let's keep in touch, and I appreciate you doing this, and I believe in what you're doing, and so it was a privilege for me to be with you.
Of
Yeah,
course.
thank you so much.
Thank
That
you
means a
very
lot.
much.
Yeah.
Okay, take care.
All right,
Yeah,
thank
you
you.
too.
Bye.
Bye.